Have you ever wondered how an Amish craftsman, no factory, no assembly line, no grid electricity, builds 10 cabinets by hand in a single workshop, and why every one of those cabinets will still be standing 100 years from now when the furniture store down the road has been replaced 3 times? Wood selection. The first difference between an Amish cabinet and a factory cabinet appears before a single cut is made. Amish craftsmen inspect every board individually. They are looking for grain direction, not placement, moisture content, and structural integrity. A board with a flaw that will compromise the finished piece is set aside or used for a less critical application. Nothing with a defect goes into a cabinet face or a drawer front. The factory does not do this. Wood arrives in bulk, is fed into a machine, and comes out as components regardless of individual board quality. The Amish craftsman also selects for species. Oak, cherry, walnut, hickory, and hard maple are the woods most commonly found in an Amish shop, all locally sourced from American forests, none imported. Joinery versus fasteners. The single most important structural difference between an Amish cabinet and a factory cabinet is how the pieces are held together. A factory cabinet is assembled with screws, staples, pocket hole fasteners, and in many cases particle board or engineered wood that cannot hold a fastener reliably after the first few years of use. The Amish cabinet uses joinery, wood-to-wood connections that lock pieces together through geometry and grain rather than through metal hardware. Mortise and tenon, dovetail, tongue and groove, rabbet. These joints have been used in woodworking for thousands of years because they work, not just for years, but for generations. When a screw joint fails, the screw hole strips and the connection is lost. When a mortise and tenon joint is cut correctly and glued with quality adhesive, it becomes stronger than the wood surrounding it. The factory saves time by using fasteners. The Amish cabinet maker saves the cabinet by not using them. Mortise and tenon. The mortise and tenon joint is the primary structural connection in an Amish cabinet frame. It consists of 2 parts: the tenon, a projecting tab cut from the end of one piece of wood, and the mortise, a precisely sized slot cut into the receiving piece. The two fit together with almost no gap. Cutting a mortise and tenon joint by hand requires a marking gauge, a mortise chisel, a mallet, and a significant amount of accumulated skill. The craftsman marks the joint dimensions directly onto the wood, chops the mortise with careful mallet strikes, and pairs the walls of the opening until the fit is exact. The tenon is cut with a back saw and trimmed with a shoulder plane until it slides into the mortise with hand pressure and no wobble. In an Amish workshop building 10 cabinets, there may be hundreds of individual mortise and tenon joints across the full production run. Each one is cut to fit its specific location. None are interchangeable. The joint that connects the leg of cabinet number 3 is not the same joint that connects the leg of cabinet number 7. Every connection is made for the wood it is joining. Dovetail joints if the mortise and tenon is the structural heart of an Amish cabinet. The dovetail is its signature. Dovetail joints are used at the corners of drawers, the interlocking fan-shaped pins and tails that are immediately recognizable to anyone who has looked at quality woodworking. They are called dovetails because the shape of the tailpiece resembles the spread tail of a bird. The geometry of the joint means it cannot be pulled apart in the direction of the greatest stress. A drawer that is pulled open and pushed closed thousands of times over decades exerts precisely that kind of stress. A dovetail joint handles it without loosening. A stapled or screwed drawer corner does not. Hand-cut dovetail joints require a marking gauge, a dovetail saw, a coping saw, and a sharp chisel. The craftsman marks the layout directly on the wood, saws the pins and tails by eye and by feel, and pairs the shoulders until the joint closes without a gap and without force. The angle of the cut, the spacing of the pins, and the tightness of the fit vary from craftsman to craftsman. In an Amish community where furniture making is a family tradition, the dovetail pattern of a particular workshop can sometimes be identified by a trained eye the same way a signature can be identified in handwriting. The hand plane. The hand plane is the tool that separates an Amish cabinet surface from a machine-sanded surface in a way that is visible and tactile. A machine sander removes material by abrading it, scratching the surface with progressively finer grits until the scratches become too small to see. The surface produced is smooth to the touch but has an open, slightly fuzzy grain structure that absorbs finish unevenly and shows wear faster than a plain surface. A hand plane removes material by slicing it. The blade passes across the wood fiber and severs it cleanly, leaving a surface that is closed, dense, and almost reflective without any finish applied at all. The difference is visible in direct light. A plain surface has depth. A sanded surface is flat. Amish craftsmen use several types of planes across the cabinet-making process. A jack plane for initial stock removal. A joiner plane for flattening long boards and ensuring edges are straight before gluing. A smoothing plane for the final surface pass that prepares the wood for finish. Each plane must be tuned, the blade sharpened to a specific geometry, the mouth set to an appropriate opening, the sole flattened. A poorly tuned plane produces tear out and chatter marks. A well-tuned plane in skilled hands produces a surface that a belt sander cannot replicate regardless of how fine the grit. No grid electricity and Amish woodworking shop does not connect to the electrical grid. This is a matter of community rule in most old order Amish districts. Grid electricity is understood as a connection to the outside world that introduces dependency and distraction. But the absence of grid electricity does not mean the absence of power tools entirely. Amish workshops run on compressed air. A diesel or gasoline engine drives an air compressor, and that compressor powers a range of pneumatic tools throughout the shop: bandsaws, drill presses, sanders, buffers, and finishing equipment. The pneumatic system is self-contained, owned by the workshop, and powered by fuel the craftsman purchases independently of any utility company. Some workshops use a system of overhead line shafts driven by a central engine, a technology that predates grid electricity and was standard in American workshops before electrification. Pulleys and belts transfer mechanical power from the central shaft to individual tool stations throughout the shop. The tools that cannot be powered by compressed air or lined shaft, the chisels, the planes, the saws for fine cuts, the scrapers for final smoothing, are hand tools, and they remain hand tools because they produce better results that way. The Amish workshop is not a primitive operation running at a disadvantage. It is a well-equipped production environment that has solved the power question in a way that keeps the craftsman in control of every variable. Finishing by hand. The finishing process on an Amish cabinet is where the difference between a piece of furniture and an heirloom becomes most visible. A factory cabinet receives 1 or 2 coats of finish applied by machine, a spray line that moves the cabinet through a misting chamber and applies an even coat of lacquer or polyurethane in seconds. The coat dries quickly, provides basic protection, and looks acceptable in a showroom. Over years of use, it wears through at the corners and edges, cannot be repaired without full stripping, and ages in a way that makes the piece look used rather than seasoned. An Amish cabinet receives finish in stages applied entirely by hand. The first stage is a wash coat, a diluted mixture that raises the grain and seals the wood pores. Once dry, the surface is sanded back with fine paper to cut the raised fibers. A second coat follows, allowed to cure fully before the next sanding. The process continues through multiple applications, with each coat bringing the surface closer to the final depth and sheen. Between stages, the craftsman inspects the surface in raking light, a single lamp positioned at a low angle that makes every imperfection visible. Any remaining tool marks, grain variations, or finish inconsistencies are addressed before the next coat goes on. The low VOC varnish used in most Amish shops penetrates the wood rather than sitting on top of it, which means it wears gradually and can be refreshed without stripping the entire piece. Customization: a factory produces one design in multiple colorways. An Amish craftsman builds to specification. When a customer commissions a cabinet from an Amish shop, the The conversation that follows is not about choosing from a catalog. It is about dimensions, wood species, finish color, door style, drawer configuration, hardware preference, and any specific functional requirements the customer has. The craftsman takes those specifications and builds a single piece to meet them. This is not a premium service offered at extra cost. It is simply how Amish cabinet making works. The tradition of custom work exists because Amish craftsmen have never operated in a mass production context. Their shops are small, one craftsman, perhaps a son or apprentice working alongside, and the output is measured in units per week rather than units per hour. That scale makes customization practical. There is no assembly line to interrupt, no production schedule to protect, no inventory of pre-built components that must be used up. The wood is selected for the specific piece. The joints are cut for the specific dimensions. The finish is mixed and applied to the customer's preference. The result is a cabinet that fits its intended location exactly, uses the wood species the customer chose, and carries the finish they selected. No two cabinets from the same Amish shop are identical because no two customers are identical. The Amish craftsman does not consider this unusual. It is the only way of working he has ever known. The lifespan. 50 years after purchase, a factory cabinet and an Amish cabinet are not the same object in any meaningful sense. The factory cabinet, if it has survived at all, which is not guaranteed, will show the full effects of its construction method. The particle board or MDF substrate that forms its carcass has expanded and contracted with humidity changes until the screws that hold it together have stripped their holes. The finish is worn through at the edges and corners where use is heaviest. The drawer slides, originally plastic or light metal, have become loose or broken. The veneer surface, if the piece had one, has lifted at the corners and edges. The piece looks its age in the way that reveals its origins. It was not built to last 50 years. It was built to be affordable at the point of purchase. The Amish cabinet at 50 years looks different. The solid hardwood carcass has done what solid hardwood does over decades. It has moved with seasonal humidity changes, the wood expanding in summer and contracting in winter, the mortise and tenon joints flexing slightly and returning without losing their grip. The surface has developed a patina, a deepening of the color and grain that cannot be replicated artificially and only appears in wood that has been used and maintained over time. The finish can be refreshed with light sanding and a new coat without stripping the piece. The dovetailed drawers still fit their openings and slide without binding. The cabinet at 50 years old is not a worn-out object waiting to be replaced. It is a piece of furniture that has become more itself with time. The 10 cabinets built in an Amish workshop this week will not be in a landfill in 15 years. That is not a claim that can be made about the 500 cabinets produced in a factory on the same day. The difference in outcome traces directly back to every decision described in this video. The wood selected board by board, the joints cut to fit rather than fastened with hardware, the surface planed rather than sanded to a compromise, the finish applied in 7 stages rather than 1, the dimensions built to a specific customer's specific space. Each of those decisions added time to the production of the piece. Each of them also added years to its useful life. The Amish craftsman does not make these decisions because he has calculated the return on investment for the customer. He makes them because they are the correct way to build a cabinet, the way his father built cabinets, and his father before him, in a tradition of woodworking that has not changed in its essential methods since the community arrived in Pennsylvania in the early 1700s. The factory will be retooled, relocated, or closed within the lifetime of the cabinets it builds. The Amish shop will pass to the craftsman's son, who will inspect boards the same way his father did, cut mortise and tenon joints with the same tools, and apply finish by hand in the same sequence. The 10 cabinets built this week will still be in use when that son is teaching his own son the same trade in the same workshop. That is not an accident of craftsmanship. It is the entire point of it.